Happy Monday, everybody. How's it going?
Happy Monday. It's going well.
It's good.
How are you
Good.
doing, Matt? Matt, MDM Matt, I think is what we're calling you, correct?
Sure, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, snow
MDM
shovel
Matt.
mat is what it's going to be called after we're finished our chat here. But we're in full Canadian winter mode here this
Oh
morning,
boy.
which most of Canada laughs at because Toronto gets a pretty temperate dose usually. But it's watching the cars get stuck out the window and people.
That's always fun.
I live downtown, so there's a healthy disdain and participation in the hipster lifestyle. So we've got people cross country skiing with their dogs on the sidewalk and down the middle of the road and looking angrily at cars, wondering why they're in their way and all that kind of stuff. So it's all that city stuff.
That's pretty hilarious. Awesome. And it's also Martin Luther King Day here in the States. So you got the day off or
Is it
observing
a
Martin Luther King Day?
happy Martin Luther King? Like, is that the greeting, or is it just people? It's an observation more so than a greeting you would say at the beginning of a conversation, or
So,
I think
so my
it's more of an
connection's broken.
observation here.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
more like take time off, hopefully think about history and the civil rights movement and such. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but yeah, if you have the day off, hope you're having a good one. It's not snowing here where we are in Salt Lake City. It's actually quite smoggy at the moment. But anyway, that's
Are you
life in
guys
the big
both in
city, I
Salt Lake
guess.
today?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Well, awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on the Monday morning data chat. Chat about. I guess we connected a few weeks ago. We were talking about things like MDM, data governance. I think you're fond of this notion of becoming a data champion as well. Can you walk us through like what that means?
Yeah, well, the what it means is, which is becoming, I'd say, increasingly rare, is that the places that I've seen it work well are the people who have been with the company, they know the business, they know the people, they know the organization, and they've been on this champion wagon 10, 15, 20 years. And I believe that it takes that type of consistency for it to cut through. And it's tough because particularly when you've got to go toe to toe with a executive or somebody or whatever, it's tough to hold your ground and say, no, we must, like, this is not a choice. We have to do it. And it comes in and out of favor. I've worked with clients who, 10 years ago are calling now and they're saying they get it, because they've tried to shut down the MDM program a couple of times over, or they were going to change vendors or whatever the case may be, but it has less and less to do with technology and a lot more to do with sort of culture, behavior, and how people interact with the technology or leverage it. And so really that champion is that person who's got that consistent voice, the person who cares is the easiest way of saying it, and really who's going to take that ownership through. Sometimes they don't start with it as their, call it official designation or title. In the last few years, it's become a little more popular to have a customer data lead or an MDM lead or, those types of things. But it's really that person who cares and ultimately takes the accountability more so than has it assigned to them, right? And so this theme of accountability runs through just about everything I bump into every day, and I would imagine it's not too different from you guys. Like, is it something that you can teach? Probably. Is it something that you can assign? You know, I don't know, but it's something that comes from within that person, maybe from how they showed up, how they were, brought up professionally or personally, and that has a lot to do with it. And I find the people who I've been successful with, either as teammates or clients, is we find each other. Those people who are passionate about what they're doing and not in a, you know, necessarily waving the flag everywhere, but they're the person in the meeting who's going to stick up for the data, or who's going to, um, you know, like I say, toe to toe with somebody who's trying to shortcut or make a decision that might not be in the long-term benefit versus the keeping the status of the schedule green, or making a change because a vendor suggested that they should, or those types of things. So that's really what it's about. And so it's where I come at it or work on it is on those longer running themes. And then it's about doing quite a bit of discovery, which is sometimes takes months or longer, to identify where a spot might be to try this, or to get something that we can really deliver end to end, so that the organization sees that when you do these things, we get this result. And similarly with things like data governance, which generally speaking, I would say that data governance is something that everybody's doing. You're just not necessarily doing it intentionally. And without doing it intentionally, you're not going to get an intentional outcome, right? So by doing something end to end and delivering it, showing the value, showing how it impacts the business, how it makes somebody's life better, right? Whether that's a call center rep, whether that's a salesperson, whether that's a operational reporting staff, or whoever that is. And then you look at it retrospectively and said, well, how were we able to do this project, so much faster? Like in the story that we hear often is, we'll be the third or fourth attempt at a given program or project, right? They'll have spent a lot of dollars, like this is, the $10-20 million type range, a few times over. And, how come, you three guys or girls, got this done in 4 months, and we've been struggling to do this. We've had, an innumerable number of VPs or data directors or heads of or whatever through here. It's like, well, you didn't understand the fundamental problem, right? You didn't have an understanding of where the data was coming from. You had the data in a application instead of in a operational data store, right? So when somebody goes to do, run a report, yes, it's a database, but the relationships are in the application layer, not in the data model, right? So it's quite difficult for somebody, trained or not, to get operational reports on a consistent basis out of a source that wasn't designed to be read that way, right? So by taking the data out of more of a transactional source, or more of a application style model, and putting it into a model that is relational, that is understood, that we've got the metadata collected for it, people know what the different tables and columns mean, and the data's there when it's supposed to be. Now you can have an analyst write a report off of that instead of engaging a data engineering effort or whatever, right? And that none of those things have to necessarily be a big pile of purchased software, right? They can be. There's certainly plenty of opportunity to do that, but when we say metadata, it doesn't necessarily have to be a metadata platform to start with, right? It could be Confluence with a well-designed template that people are filling in, right? And then then you just grow from there. So it's, when we get back to that result, showing people what was accomplished with those pieces that are more in a pretty grassroots type technology style. But then, if you want to grow them and build them, and now you want to have, some sort of workflow, or you want to automate something, or you want to have more developers working on it, or more team members working on it, now you need to start getting into the software, right? Because you need to have that rights management. You need to have better control. And then at that point, it's like, well, how come we don't have that? It's like, well, you used to, but it fell out of service, or we don't have it anymore, or whatever. It's like, okay, let's go get some, right? So it's a much different conversation than, hello, Mr. CFO, I want to go buy a metadata management platform this quarter. It's like, well, what the heck do we need that for? Like, what do you mean we don't know about our data? We're doing reports every day. We've got a GL, we've got a chart of accounts. Like, why do we need? So that's the orientation, right? It's about figuring out what can you do something end to end, get that achieved, and then now championing the, call it professionalization or the industrialization of the other pieces. And I mean, this is simplified dramatically, given on the organizations. Most of the organizations I work at are, companies you'd recognize, logos on buildings, on the stock market, that sort of thing, that you know, they may or may not have ESB. They may or may not have their lake work done. They may or may not have a warehouse anymore. They more than likely don't have the staff anymore. And this is one of the other big topics that I've got going on a pretty consistent basis, is that we're probably a couple of generations out of companies having the in-house staff that can do this work, right? We haven't been doing the work in-house, and as a result, they no longer have the skills, right? Like they've got developers, they've got people who can, you know, lay down code in a project, but in a product, but they don't have people who can do that systems engineering end to end, who can take a problem set and take it apart and put it into components and then build it out. And it's not a skill set that we've held on to, I believe, at least in a lot of companies.
That's interesting. Walk me through this. I think that you hit on something very interesting that I'd like to touch on. You mentioned the word accountability. How often do you see people given the responsibility, or I guess the responsibility of getting MDM done or some data governance project, but not given the authority that they need, right? But they're still held accountable to do all this stuff. Is this something you see often? We see this all the time in our space with engineering, where it's like you're given a lot of responsibility and a lot of accountability, but zero authority. So
yeah, I mean, and these environments are complex, right? So it's not that it's always just one thing, and if you do this, then you can do the other. Like it's, you know, the piece would be, and you guys probably see this, whether it's inside companies or at vendors or solution providers. You know, you've got a practice leader who's let's say they're a published author, or they're on the speaking circuit, or, you know, they've got all this, you know, they've got the authority, they've got the knowledge, they've got the understanding, but they don't necessarily have a team to go out and deliver it. Okay, so you go get one. It's like, okay, so they can write a job description, and we've all seen the job descriptions, right? It's like somebody who invented computers and somebody who's been doing this technology for 10 years that's only been around for 6 months, and, you know, like all the way down to the bottom of the list. And then the punchline, right? The salary, 55 to 75, or, you know, $42 an hour, or whatever the numbers are, right? And it's disconnected, right? And it's not to say that every company is going to either attract the talent of a FANG or be able to, you know, punch out, you know, 300 grand for a lead engineer or something like that or whatever. But there needs to be an understanding that, you know, you can only make with the ingredients that, you know, that you've got. And so, and the other aspect to that is, you know, I call them project people versus run people, right? And there's a difference between somebody who's creating and operating. Oh, Joe's falling.
We lost Joe.
There's Joe's back. Oh,
Okay.
he stood up and he's talking, but we can't
sorry.
hear him.
My Wi-Fi keeps cutting out. I'm using a Mac M1, and sometimes the Wi-Fi cuts out. So I'm going to walk over to my Intel and log in. So yeah, keep talking. I'll be listening.
Okay.
No problem. You know, the idea of bringing somebody in that can create, or that can listen to a problem and then take it apart and put it together and build out the solution, that's a different person than the person that's going to come in and maintain the code, or that's going to, you know, add a feature or a function to something, right? Like it's not meant to be in a disparaging way, but in an oversimplified way, like adding a value to a drop-down box is different than getting the warehouse put in place from which that drop-down box grabs its values or its relationships from. So it's a different person. And so as a result, you know, you ask the people to deliver the work, but they're not given the tools, right? So then at that point, okay, so what do? It's probably expectation management time, right? So it's like, look, we can do this, but it's not happening in quarter. It's not happening in year, right? This is going to be a 2.5 year, you know, if we're going to do it in-house, we're going to need to build a capability. We're going to need to get a few things done. We're probably going to make some mistakes. We're going to need to do some U-turns. And, you know, you're looking at, you know, 2 to 3 years. And we've got, you know, I've got companies who have gone it in-house, right? They eschewed march the integrators in or march the vendors in, and we're going to figure this out. And you know what, long term, that's probably the right answer for most companies, right? You build a capability, now you can attract the talent, right? Because there's nothing worse as a person who's there to do stuff or to, practice their skills or to build their skills than to be brought in and then just watch a whole bunch of external people get all the good work and you get to, write the run books or something or whatever, right? So it's tough, and but it's back to those expectations, right? Calling out hey, we're going to do this year is one thing, but giving the people the time and the space and the skills to do it is a whole different thing. That's the background we're used to seeing. There he is, Mr. Joe Reis, back in his
Sorry about that.
studio.
I thought I'd be using. I thought I'd be clever and try and do it on my laptop since
Didn't work.
me off, but it's
I'm wired
the
all the
M1
way through to you this morning. I didn't take any chances. I got a 50-foot cable running from the desk into
smart.
the switch and just.
Yeah, no, it's there's something with the Mac M1s where the Wi-Fi will just cut out, and it was just like I couldn't deal with the lag. Yeah, it sucks. Anyway,
So yeah, as I'm listening to you, I mean, a couple things spring to mind here, and one of those is that I think in general, there's a tendency to think that companies having big teams and more maturity is uniformly positive. But I think what happens is once you have that maturity, you kind of end up with a different set of problems. And the different set of problems is organizational momentum. In principle, a big organization with DBAs and ETL developers should be able to solve MDM problems better than a small organization. But what can happen is everyone gets so in a rut and they each have their silos and they each have their domains of ownership and they don't want to cooperate anymore. And then it becomes very hard for you to come in and say, we need MDM. These are problems that need to be fixed. The organization becomes very resistant. How do you address that problem if you're dealing with large?
The arms folded owner of the data warehouse
Right.
looking down the table saying, what are you talking about, kid? We've already got this. Like, why are you asking for this? I don't get the kid part quite as much anymore, but that's where the understanding of the discovery plays in, right? So by the time you get to those, there's a better word than dispute, but those concerns being raised, you're able to say, well, the reporting team has a backlog of over a year of requests that they need to fulfill, or the addresses are not trustworthy, or the whatever, right? And I mean, they all sound like trivial things when they're out by themselves, but the real one is, if you guys could do this, you'd have done it. So why the resistance, right? And it's not to say that all of these solutions don't need to coexist, right? It's not to say that if you're going to do MDM, you need to get rid of your warehouse, or you need to get rid of your ODS, or you need to get rid of your whatever. It's just a different thing in a different way. Now, the part that is also very true is that we're in a very fortunate position right now, right? Like, you can do so much so quickly with technology that was just, it's Star Wars compared to where we are now, right? Like, when you had to get the servers ordered and get them landed on the dock and then get them racked and then get them installed and and now it's, if somebody's got a file that's been PII managed, you could get that up and have it in a SaaS or a cloud environment, inside of a week, showing, demonstrating what it is you want to be able to do. Now, implementing that, within the enterprise end to end and all the rest of that kind of stuff is a different thing. But you could prototype some, do a proof of concept, proof of technology pretty rapidly to show, this is what I mean. This is, oh, well, we can't. No, we don't, we don't have that. And it's like, I know, right? Because you don't, and nor should, I believe, at least, the buy versus build is as old as the hills, right? As far as the, should you be casting your own party model? Should you be, doing address cleansing? Should you be doing, like, some companies, yes. Most companies, no, right? And that's that's just the other part of the reality is that, building it is one thing, maintaining it, as you know, is where the fun starts, right? And particularly if, the people leave. And so now you've got a whole bunch of in-house custom stuff that needs to be built out. Like we did a program that was all, in-house PL Squeal, scripting for their ETL. It was so brittle that it was just, nobody touched it, right? So, oh, no, we can't, we work around it. It's like, well, how do you work around your ETL pipeline? Like, what do you mean you don't? And, so that was go in. Why do you need this? Well, we're going to do something in like the community edition of Talend, I think we used. It's credible. It was good stuff. It was a single developer, so it wasn't a big, multi-unit team to manage or anything like that. But then, being able to see with clarity what is actually happening, seeing the logic where it's happening. If we want to fix something, that's where you fix it. If we want to change something, that's where you change it. Like the visual part is plus or minus depending on who you are. But, that's all part of it. So it's that getting around the why do we need this, or why, from the technical perspective, that's kind of the conversation. From the business perspective, it's a much different thing, right? And you've heard Mr. Whisper, Scott Taylor talk about how to get that message across, but that's those themes are extremely powerful. Right, and it's very difficult for the business to deal with 3 years, 5 years. I talk to people frequently. They're like, "Oh, well, we've been working on our data strategy for 9 years, but we haven't quite."
That's insane.
Sure, it's insane.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's like you're coming up with a strategy to get a strategy at that point. Like it's
and it's not that that's been an iterative process that we've been actively or consciously working on this for 9 years or whatever. This has been an active process and it's a live thing or whatever. Like it's a half-finished PowerPoint in somebody's drive on somebody's job jar list that just because we're too busy dealing with operate. It's like, do you have any whatever, you start listing off the problems that are evident when it comes to MDM or whatever, not the least of which is, when you get into an M&A situation, right? Somebody says, well, if we're going to buy this company, how many more customers do we have as a result of this than we have now? A lot of places don't even know how many they have now, right? Or they think they have 10 million, they really have 2 million, right? And if you're a public company, that's not a great thing to say out loud, right? If you're walking around with a 10 million number and it's really a 2 million number, right? So, but these are facts that people should be quite confident in, right? So, and that's, the business conversations are much, much different, but the why or why not, at least for me, I find are less so, right? I think now that the products and the solutions are becoming more achievable in the mid-market, maybe we're seeing that again. But I mean, those evangelical YMDM things or whatever, like that's 2007, 2009 kind of stuff or whatever. The thing that we're dealing with now is project recovery, right? Re-implementing MDM because of whatever reason, or getting off of a legacy approach, and they've moved to the cloud and they want to do something there. They just want other capabilities. But the other capabilities one is a slippery topic for me as well, because a lot of the MDM platforms are like Microsoft Office, right? Hundreds, thousands of features and functions. How many do you use, right? The advanced guy probably is using table of contents generator, page numbers, that sort of thing. But, so that's, 5 to 10 of those features and functions capabilities that are getting used on a day-to-day basis. But then, they're buying this box with 100. So it's, it's that, from that perspective, it's all the same as far as, knowing what you need, knowing what your problems are before you go out and ask somebody what they are, because they'll tell you what they are if you ask them.
Interesting. We have some audience questions here.
Yeah. I don't see them, so I'll take your word for it.
Awesome. They're imaginary. I just actually typed them about myself. I'm just kidding. Christine, what's up, Christine? Are there ethical concerns to use MDM? That's the question she's asked.
Ethical concerns. I've not seen it put that way. Like similar to maybe what AI-ish, like that sort of AI ethical concerns or whatever. I mean, in terms of, there are regulatory concerns in some jurisdictions around commingling data from across business lines. So for example, in Canadian banking, banks are allowed to sell insurance as well as do retail banking, but they're not allowed to cross-market to each other within them. That sort of thing. That's regulatory, whether that's what's implied with ethical or not. I can, with enough coffee and time, I can get going on how I think it's not moral or ethical not to do data properly. Right? I think it's a big waste of a lot of things, right? Or there's a lot of missed opportunity, particularly in the healthcare space, right? If you're not taking full advantage of your data set, or you're not making it available to research, or you're not making it, I think that could be an ethical thing, but that's probably not what Christine's asking about.
Yeah, if you can clarify your question, Christine, that'd be good. So, in the meantime, Guy Thompson, he has a question here. What's up, Guy? Regular listener. He asks, is there a lot of pushback from companies when they hear 2 to 3 years for a project?
Well, what happens is they don't hear 2 to 3 years for a project. They hear 6 months, right? And then, so I mean, now the piece that I would say that makes it a 2 to 3 years, right? And it absolutely does not need to be a 2 to 3 year thing. The challenge is that it turns into be a 2 to 3 year thing for a number of reasons. One, they weren't ready. It was a technology-led program instead of a business-led program. And what I mean by that is that we don't know why we're doing it, right? So when you get the implementation team, let's call them developers, whether that's in the engineering or in the product consultant space, start coming to the business and asking questions about, well, who's a customer, right? What attributes make up a customer for you? Oh, from what perspective are you asking? From sales and marketing, or from operations, or from service, or what do you mean? It's like, well, if you're a nimble enough company, right? It's, the three of us and Guy, we can probably push out a decision this afternoon, right? But if you're a bank or an insurance company or a telco or something like that, you might not get to make that decision until the next whatever board meeting sits, right? So this is what starts to drag out programs, when you need to start making those decisions and dealing with, well, maybe a company would already have, right? So if they've got their attributes set, right? So this is if you've got your dictionary, you've got your glossary, you've got your metadata, you've got your integration platform sorted out, you've got a quality platform set out, you've got, data engineering is already on point, you've got infrastructure team that knows what they're doing, you've got, you start adding all those pieces up, then yeah, you can do MDM in 6 months. But because of its nature, right, you're going across organizational boundaries, you're going across technology boundaries in most cases, you start to bump into all the politics of any enterprise implementation. And this is back to what I was saying on the picking something and getting it done end to end. I find that's the, if people say, how come you can do this and other people can't or whatever, that's the thing, right? That's the picking something, and so that allows the team to focus, right? So when you bump into a data quality problem, you're not solving that as part of the MDM implementation, right? It's on the list. We're aware of it. We know it. It needs to be dealt with, but we're not dealing with it inside the MDM tent, right? So MDM doesn't become the solve all of our technical debt issues related to data forever and ever, amen. It becomes about, getting these whatever number of use cases delivered end to end, and then we learn from it, right? And so then we progress. But but it's 2 to 3 years is, and it's not just an MDM thing. That's just an enterprise implementation lifestyle problem, if you will, but it doesn't have to be that long, but there are, I would say, prerequisites and learning and understanding that need to be in place to make it successful inside a shorter period of time.
We tend to find this happens a lot too. I would say, and it's not just MDM. I would say for most technical projects in general, right? I just think this is sort of, and it seems like the larger the organization gets, I'm sure that we could all figure out some sort of equation that would describe the length of time given by size of company,
We
given
used to
also
have a
by
funny one that would go by number of elevators at the corporate head office.
oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Obviously by type of company, right? Because, there are some big tech companies out there that, I mean, it's just sort of second nature and it's like, yeah, just get it done. But it definitely seems in, I would call it the more mature enterprise, so to speak. These things just,
Anybody with legacy tech,
yeah.
right? Like it's you know, the new upstart company where everything is on one platform. They need to be thinking about MDM, right? They need to have an MDM mindset, but they might not necessarily need an MDM platform, right? Because you don't have that classic sort of Hydra hub and spoke, into one place, for either authoring or management and maintenance, and then every time somebody wants an address, they come through here to get it, and all that, machinery. It's a big company, and that's where this was born out of, right? Like the market when I started with it was sort of coming out of the portal days, and out of the enterprise application integration days, and then into what was customer data integration. Then there's product and all that kind of stuff, and now we're all sort of under the MDM umbrella. But that those problems, as companies, got bigger, it came together. People were more interested in understanding, hey, Joe is one person, one customer. We don't want to, it used to be a lot about mailing, right? So mailing him 4 brochures or whatever to the same address and all that kind of stuff or whatever. And now it's, a little more sophisticated, or less sophisticated, depending on your perspective, where they, Jay Reis, Joe Reis, Joseph Reis, it's one guy with one wallet. So, why not treat him like a valuable customer instead of a guy with a, prepaid cell phone, right? Or whatever the case may be, right?
Or beeper or something. Christine, actually, she clarified her question here. It was the original one was, are there ethical concerns to use MDM? She clarified this by asking, are there certain types of data that companies should retain but may choose to delete when they use data governance or MDM?
Okay, so I mean that's going to be very much an industry-driven or jurisdictional type question. I think there's a point in there that's very important in terms of, we went from the internet is big to the world is fast to the big data and cloud and all this kind of stuff. And should we have zettabytes of data kicking around inside of a company or whatever? What purpose does that serve, or what use does that serve? Those are good questions. But when we're talking about MDM, at least in the context that I operate, this is names and addresses, right? You're talking about 100 attributes, maybe. If you need the data that you need to transact the business of the company, right? So ship an order, sell an order, set up an account, those core pieces of information, that's something that's required to serve or to service. That information is core to the business, and you're going to need to retain that. Tangential information out of there or whatever is going to be up to the business. But I don't, how long it should be kept for from a governance perspective, we talk about sort of roll-off periods for how long you should or can maintain data for. The good news, bad news with our technology world, right? The compute power that we have and the ability to not necessarily worry about having too much data inside of a database before it tips over. Those types of problems about rolling off data have kind of reduced in concern. Still something to be mindful of, but it's less of a concern. So it's usually like a 7-year horizon most companies are working with, but again, it really depends, and then that might roll off into more of an analytical store where they're using it from a bigger basis. But the MDM becomes that source of relationships, or that key store, to use a more generic term or whatever, that's then used in that analytical store that has the longer running or the historical data in it.
Gotcha. Actually, it's interesting. A lot of these questions have to do with expectations. I'll give you another one here.
Yeah, sure.
What should be a good realistic? It's from Raymond Tan. What's up, Raymond? What should be a good realistic MDM implementation project duration for, say, 200,000 employee U.S. company?
200,000. Well, so I mean,
Small company, they're a startup. It's fine. So,
that's right. Yeah. I mean, if we read it as 200,000 customers, right? Like the 200,000 employees. If you're talking about MDM, like from an internal basis, or if we're talking about it from a customer basis, the number of records, I would say, is less the driver. It's more about we've talked a little bit about the multiple sources and needing to rationalize, right? The classic MDM pipeline is this cleanse, match, merge process where you're bringing in information from multiple sources and running them through a series of rules to determine whether or not they are the same, but yet still maintaining referential visibility back to where they came from, right? So that you end up with, like I said, the Joe Reis and all of his versions or instances from the other sources. So, I mean, you could have a small company with, an AS400 or a PC under the cash register, 1,500 stores across the country that are coming into the center, and you want to manage that together, right? Like that's, there's probably some semblance of an MDM workflow or pipeline that you want to do, maybe not operationally, right? Not transactionally. Every time somebody beeps a scanner gun in a store, that you're going to need to worry about that going back to the mothership. But getting those data sets back on a nightly or weekly basis or whatever, and then into the middle to sort of crunch through them and find out, more about where your customer, whether through a loyalty card or through some other information that you've got on them, is this person, do they go to multiple stores? They tend to go to the same store. What's their home postal code relative to the store? How far are they traveling? Do we need more stores in that area? All that type of stuff. So it really comes back to the, is there a need versus a volume of data?
That's a good point.
That would be how I would look at it. So, but that said, you probably don't need the full-blown, Informatica, customer 360 or multi-domain MDM platform. Probably wouldn't want to pay for it either. But, there are plenty of good, Reltio's got a community on-ramp. I think it's like 10,000 records or something like that. You can, I don't know if that's consolidated or raw, that you can use in the cloud instance. Talent you can set up, without support. There's no particular limit on there. So I mean, you can get the outcome without necessarily having the full-blown tech stack. But I would say it's more about context than volume.
Interesting. Got another question here from Auntie. What's up? What is a bit ago? I think when we first started talking, we talked about kind of a 9-year data strategy. He asked, what has been the main reasons behind these 9-year data strategy scenarios?
Yeah, so this is why I call it work for myself, or work with a small band of other practitioners, because I get to answer questions like this without too much varnish or pomp and circumstance wrapped around them. My opinion as to why this happens is that the individual who owns it isn't being held accountable, right? So I don't understand how somebody can hold their job for that long and not get banged on from the board or from the CEO or the president or whoever to say, what's the plan here? Like, what is going on? And they might not necessarily need to know, hey, this is what we're doing with metadata at the board level, but it'd be nice if they did. But I really believe that it has to do with people being held accountable for those types of, I think it's a key document right up there with your business strategy. It should be if not a chapter within your tech strategy. It could be a standalone document depending on what it is. A lot of organizations, it's sort of the same people covering the same domains. So as a result, it sort of becomes part of the same document. But I think it should be. I think it's embarrassing, is what it is.
Your thoughts on this one, Matt Housley?
Oh, I mean, to me, this is another one of those classic organizational momentum problems where the tricky part is, Joe and I are kind of fond of talking about how stuff we call legacy tends to be stuff that actually makes money, right? Like it does power the business, and you have to give it some credit for that. And what happens is you do have a stakeholder who's not accountable to improve things because basically their job is just to keep the machine humming in the old way. And so they're not particularly interested in upgrading things. Like, well, that's more work for me. It might break something.
Why are we going to spend another $1 on this thing when it's making $5, right? So it's, that's...
Yeah. And the carrot is, at least, we try to claim, and I think it's accurate, you could be making 10 if you got some of these data issues solved. And I mean, we really push the idea of, on top of MDM, deploying real, statistical, analytical strategies that can improve the business in various ways. But you need the data quality as a prerequisite. And someone who's been in a job for 20 years, kept the machine humming for a long time, it'd be very hard for them to be motivated.
Maybe.
It's a big issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a difference between like annuities and bonds and stocks, right?
Yeah.
Like the legacy stuff is your bonds. It's predictable. It makes money. But the problem is things are changing very fast in the world today, right? And so I think to have some sort of comfort level with your legacy technology, on one hand, it's comforting. On the other hand, it sounds cliched, but you do have to innovate. It's kind of goes without saying, it's a technology podcast, right? I mean, we're all about innovating and taking steps to do that. But again, if the incentive's not there, then I think you do get this 19-year strategy. And to me, that's also a failure of leadership, I think, is what you're also saying there.
From my tagline is lead or leave.
Right. Yep, for sure.
Just, you have to be active, right? And the piece that, it's just the piece from the, like, not to put it all on the board table is, for what they observe and what they get to see, there's a high, like 80, north of 70 for sure, failure rate for these enterprise programs.
Yep.
Right. So why am I going to put my capital at risk and be quite disruptive and, pull that work onto our plate when we can, keep things going the way it is? And this is the tug of war that happens inside these companies, is particularly if you've got people who are getting the job done. Mm-hmm. Right? It might be with baling wire and Excel and duct tape and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but it's getting done, right? And so this is the other cynical tagline that I would throw out there, which is that, companies don't change until they feel pain.
Well, this is something I find interesting, is like this 9-year strategy. I'm guessing with the pace of innovation and quote disruption going on, I don't know that companies are going to have the luxury of having a 9-year data strategy going forward. You'll be out of business. You'll be replaced by somebody that has like a 9-month data strategy.
These are S&P brands. These are not,
I will push back on that and say, like, it's interesting. I was showing my wife the Berkshire Hathaway 2021 meeting, and Buffett showed the incumbent companies, the largest companies in the world in I think it was 89 or something, right? And then he fast forwarded to today, and it's one of those things where none of the companies that were the top dogs were there anymore, right? And so
where's GE? All those
GE.
guys,
What is GE right now? Yeah. I mean, it's not his question. But it's you had Exxon, all these types of companies that were leading the charge even through 2000, right? Exxon and these companies were the top companies, and now fast forward and they're not on the list, right? They're not in the top 20. And I guess the point is they've been displaced by. And also by market cap too. Last year when he showed that slide, it was like Apple was, it was March 31st, 2021. Apple was like a 2 trillion market cap. Now it's 3, which is kind of astounding, right? But again, it's just all these companies, populating the list. And I would dare say that, you could be a Fortune 500 company now, an S&P 500. There's no guarantee, especially given the cycle of just how quickly companies are leaving the S&P these days. That.
Yep.
So maybe.
Yep. Or the
who knows?
companies that hear Amazon coming up their back path, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't take much to add a category to Amazon and just wipe out.
No, Amazon, for their weight, I mean, if you think of boxers, like they're one of the biggest, heaviest boxers in the world, and they move like a flyweight. It's crazy. So,
but they've got the leverage, right?
They got the leverage.
This is the data show, right? Like they've got that machinery is tuned, right? Like they've got a foundation on which they can add, or platform, to reuse that term, right? They've got a platform onto which they can add a business in what seems to be overnight, right?
Yeah.
It's probably a lot more work than it seems, but it's unbelievable, right? And the companies who are, right, a lot of the technology that we're using now, whether that's Spark or they've come out of companies that have done engineering work, right? And there's not a lot of companies that do that kind of investment, or that type of engineering work where we've got a problem, we don't see anything else in the marketplace, so we're going to go ahead and build it now. The dangerous piece that you've probably seen and heard before are people who do think that they are so special and that there isn't anything that's out there or whatever, and we're going to be Facebook or whatever, and it's like, that's a problem too.
Never seen that before.
No, I'm sure not, right? So, I was almost going to say snowflake, but I remembered where I was, so I didn't say that. But that's as much a problem as others, right? And they front run the foundational work, which isn't, that's the problem, right? So you get into, 2022 is going to be the year for AI and ML, and we're standing up this team, and we got this data science leader in who's going to build up a team and all this kind of stuff. All those are great things. But if you don't have your fundamentals in place,
This is so true.
those poor people that just got all excited about joining and starting something new and innovating and driving the business and all that kind of stuff are going to be munging their lives away, and they're going to go, right? Because that's not what they want to do, right? They're coming, all rockets firing out of wherever they've come from to come and build this thing and do something great, and the raw ingredients aren't there, so they're out.
I've very much had this experience. I won't go into too many details, but
Same.
got hired to be a data scientist. The data, for a variety of reasons, the data just wasn't quite where it needed to be to make that happen.
Right. Well, this is the whole thing, right? There's a couple, as we talk about this frequently, right? And you got companies who are still trying to figure out how to get data out of the front end, and now they want to build a thinking machine, right? It's just like,
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like that's a board level thing too, right? It's like, why are we cutting a check to do this when you can't show me you can do, right? Like we used to have a muffler shop thing in Canada, probably. I think it was just in Canada. Anyhow, the tagline was, first you get good, then you get fast. Right? And that's, if anything, that's the data business, right?
That's so true. That's so true. I mean, we always, Matt and I have this moniker, most companies we see are barely doing BI, let alone AI, but everyone wants to do AI for whatever reason.
For me, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, don't get us started on that either. On this notion, Charles Sutton, he asked a good question here. I find that proving ROI to business leaders gets more traction on any data project. Does ROI need to be proven for MDM? And if so, how do you prove that?
So ROI, business cases, business value assessments, BVAs, all this kind of stuff, or whatever, a great management consulting tool to get projects approved. But generally speaking, the challenges that occur are it's difficult to identify and measure how much better something is if you aren't measuring it today, right? So how do you show your improvement from A to B if you don't know what A is, right? So this becomes a difficult topic. I like to speak in terms of business process or day in the life type stories in the English sense of the word, or even in the Agile sense of the word, right? Like that's where people can understand, right? It's like, this team is able to deliver something on their own inside of a month when we have this. Today, they can't do it at all, right? It takes them 2 months or 2 years or whatever the answer is. So the ROI in the classic sense of, here's an Excel spreadsheet and this is these are the hard and soft benefits that so-and-so is signing up for. Most of them are probably all soft and mushy, and nobody's going to stand up for them and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But I really like to wire things around, give me your hardest problem, or what's keeping you from being able to do whatever, whether that's operationally, right? So this is back to that operational effectiveness or operational, greatness before trying to blow the doors out on some new corporate strategy. Show me those, and we'll show you how to fix it with, better data fundamentals. Maybe it's MDM. I've had projects where I would responded to an RFP, went in to do the program. It was an MDM project. We didn't do an MDM implementation, right? It was a fundamental data management project, and that's all they needed, right? I was satisfied with that. I was happy. It makes for a great story, right? Here's the MDM guy that didn't have to put in MDM, but it's a that's where the leverage is, and that's where I like to show that value, ROI. I understand what the person's saying, so I appreciate Charles' question. I don't mean to.
Yeah. ROI is a tricky one though, right? Because there's tangible ROI, then there's also, I think, the intangible ones, like just how much better are you operating?
Most companies aren't
this, right?
organized enough to actually measure ROI
Right.
before or after. So it's a bit of a theater event in my opinion.
Yeah, we find this a lot too. It's kind of like, what's the ROI of getting a data warehouse or upgrading my tech? And I'm like, I don't know. It's sort of,
There's a report somewhere, right? There's going to be an
Right.
article or a magazine thing or whatever that shows, this is the ROI of, fill in the blank vendor. I don't want to upset anybody's friends, right? So, but that's how they speak. That's how the market speaks. That's
Yeah.
how that whole corporate vendor machinery works. But if we're talking about reality or whatever, it's about, what thing, and it's up to the company to hold everybody to account to what is that thing that we care about, and what are we trying to make it, better, instead of some nebulous term or metric.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's kind of like, this old saying, like, what's the ROI of putting on your socks in the morning? It's like, I don't know. I can tell you how painful it is to wear the same socks for like a week straight or 2 weeks.
Or how
I think I did that as a
painful it is to
teenager.
get them on, depending on the morning.
So start developing a sole on the bottom of it or something. So, got one final question here from Guy. Thanks to the audience for some great questions here. But Guy asks, what would be some examples of companies with really good MDM, and what makes them good?
What makes them good? I mean, the ones that I see that I know are using MDM and are, it comes through in the material. I think there's a number of the banks that are doing a pretty good job at it. They've been at it for a long time. They were on early, and they work at it. So this is that, you see them adding products or adding business lines or spinning out or spinning on new relationships. So it's that financial services crowd that you're going to see doing it. In the PIM space, I'm mostly a customer data guy, but the PIM space, you can see this when you're dealing with Apple, or you're dealing with Samsung or Best Buy or whatever, that type of stuff, or whatever, where the products aren't getting jumbled around. Obviously Amazon, they probably don't necessarily call it MDM, but they're strong there. But it's the thing that I like to see is I'll use different spellings of my name when I'm filling out information, just to see where it comes back, right? This is the data problem that you develop over time. So is that data being sold? Is it coming back? Is somebody fixing it? I know probably more companies that I interact with that have bad MDM than examples of great ones, but I think that any of these multi-line financial institutions, generally speaking, have done a lot with it.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. For people who want to learn more about you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Try to be. MDMcoach.com is where I put some of the material that I've put on LinkedIn just so that it's there.
Nice.
And you know, can either have a conversation through the site or through LinkedIn, but happy to help where I can.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely
Thank
enlightening.
you guys. I appreciate
talk to you.
the chat. Hopefully that's was helpful to your audience.
Yeah, I think so. MDM is one of these subjects. I think Matt and I always talk about this, where it's data governance in general. Like it feels squishy on quite a few levels, and I think Matt and I, well, the Matts and I, agree that it shouldn't be this way, right? Like these are fundamentals, but at the same time, why is it that we have these death logs that go on for years when this
I think
should
both of them are
fundamentally
more
be-
lifestyle than technology, right?
Mhm.
If I phrase it that way, right?
Totally
Like
agree.
you can support them, right? Like you can do data governance without putting in Calibra, right? You can do data governance without, you know, but it's helpful, right? If you're a complex enough organization,
Yeah.
right? It makes sense to do it. Like, should you be building it in Excel or Confluence or whatever? Probably not. But I mean, if that's what you've got and you need to do that until you get the momentum going to show, hey, but now you're able to go to the market and say, hey, we're doing this kind of grassroots and we're not able to do A, B, and C. Can you do that? And it's like, yeah, we can do that or whatever. It's like, okay, so now maybe I should go buy some.
And I bet those are going to be more successful implementations versus like I need to get a tool and then I'm going to be awesome, right? It's
But that's the tech-led versus you know, either value-led or business.
But it's the same thing in behaviorally. Like if you know, I see a lot of people, especially on New Year's, like I'm going to get a Peloton, or I'm going to get, you know, I'm going to take up running or something. Yeah, I'm going to buy fancy shoes, and then 2 weeks later, they're, you know, they ain't doing much with it, right? So
at the end of the day, a wrench is just a wrench, right? You still need the wrench if you want to be a plumber, but you're not going to be a plumber because you bought a wrench.
Right, and you know, all those analogies are great, right? Like the good carpenter doesn't blame their tools, or the
Right.
you know, the gym business model is to sign up as many people as possible and hope nobody comes, right? Like that's, you know, take that as you will as far as enterprise software is concerned. But you know, that's it's very much like I think that if people focus on what is that problem and crush that, then they'd be just so much smarter in terms of what it is they need help with, whether that's, you know, skill, whether they need people that can do a particular thing, or whether that they need some tooling to do that. But I think that companies are concerned about the pace at which they're going to get something done, and instead of the outcome. And as a result, they you know, they rush, and they just don't get what they thought they were getting.
Preach. That's I couldn't have said better myself, or the other Matt couldn't have said better himself either. It's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, Matt.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
So yeah, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube at Ternary Data. If you haven't also subscribed to our newsletter at ternarydata.com. We have weekly articles that are exclusive to the newsletter. And also, if you didn't know, this is actually available as a podcast as well. So it's on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. So if you happen to be on a podcast service that you know, allows reviews, please give us 5 stars. Smash the like button on YouTube, and yeah, it's awesome. So again, thanks for coming on. I'd love to have you on again. So yeah, and coming up next week, we have Andreas Kretz. He's going to be talking about all things data engineering. It's always a fun time with Andreas, our buddy over in Germany, doing some awesome stuff with data engineering education. And then the following week, we have Bruno Aziza. He's the one of the heads of analytics and data over at Google Cloud. We're going to be talking about whatever's on Bruno's mind. The guy is awesome. He's entertaining. I hope he does the interview from his car as well, like he does his podcast. That would be pretty awesome. And yeah, so stay tuned for that and some other awesome guests on the horizon. So again, thanks, Matt. And we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good week.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.